The Fantasmagorium show presents Guns, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. 35 years ago, Timothy Dalton returned for his second and final showing as 007. Now that I mention it, David Hedison returned for his second and final showing as Felix Leiter in the final Bond film of the 1980s. And with that, we have a lot of franchise veterans taking a final bow. Of course, James Bond closes out the decade with an explosive crescendo in 1989's License to Kill. My name is Scotty R37. My opposite number, Catherine, is here, and Steve is throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars out of a plane somewhere in the Florida Keys. How are you doing, Kat?
I noticed that there was one specific major anniversary that you didn't mention in the intro.
I was waiting for you.
Uh-huh. So we have been gone for a while.
Yes.
Both from this show and from the channel in general. I think I didn't check the playlist. What was the last thing we did for this? Was it the Dr. No anniversary, or was it
Did we do Live and Let Die?
We might have done that. Oh no, we were going to, and then we just linked the video and the old video instead.
The last intro. Yeah, the last intro I have is Live and Let Die.
Well, today, August 4th, 2024, marks the third anniversary of this show.
Specifically, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns.
And the third anniversary of us having a YouTube show.
Oh.
The one that started all of them.
The Fantasmagorium show proper?
No, but the one that started all of our shows, all our spin-off shows.
Okay, so our specifically sharing YouTube time together, eating up other people's bandwidth. 3 years. Today?
Yes, today.
Holy moly. Well, it doesn't feel like it. Although I guess it does take a couple of months to go over 25 James Bond movies. So that, and it has been a great journey. Like, one of my favorite things is being able to talk James Bond, and especially someone of your infinite knowledge, your encyclopedic Rolodex of all things Fleming. And it has been a journey to the point where we are getting decades-long anniversaries for some of our favorite shows. My childhood favorite, which would have been License to Kill. If you are, usually we do, and we have in the past sort of gone on a step-by-step recount and recap of the plot.
Not this time.
But I don't think we have to do that this time, because if you wanted to see our full in-depth License to Kill review from earlier, it is in the playlists on the Fantasmagorium show. You can check that out. But this one's more of just sort of basking in the glow of late 80s action, drug-fueled James Bond action. I love this movie so much. I know some people find it underwhelming or too derivative of the action drug-fueled tropes of the late 80s, but I find it perfect this is the first time we ever get to see James Bond go rogue, which is in the Daniel Craig era, something that he just basically does. That's what James Bond does. He goes rogue. But this is really the prototypical serious James Bond that would eventually be embraced by more people when, as I said, Daniel Craig took over the mantle with Casino Royale. Yeah,
and this is back when the whole going rogue thing was a novel idea, before Ethan Hunt did it in every movie except the second one. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't get why people would criticize it for being derivative, because every Bond film from the 70s onwards has been derivative of something else that's going on. Like, Live and Let Die is derivative of all the blaxploitation films. Man with the Golden Gun is derivative of all the kung fu movies. Spy Who Loved Me, that became environmentalist. That's a hot thing. Like, now we'll just do that. Not as derivative, but a little bit from You Only Live Twice. It's the same kind of, instead of swallowing spaceships, we're swallowing submarines. And then Moonraker, we'll steal shuttles, and derivative of Star Wars, and so it goes on and on. So I don't get why this movie in particular catches that kind of flack, but it does.
Well, and there is sort of there's a sense that when James Bond the franchise started proper, it was the trendsetter. It was like defining cool, and it was the one that was emulated. And as time went on, it became a little bit more reflective of entertainment that was gaining more popularity as James Bond sort of waned, never really fading from into obscurity, but it did pick its cues from other pop culture phenomenons of the time.
Right, which is why the Craig era decided to, we have to do shared universe thing for all these movies because that's what's going on right now. And it's like, no, we really don't. But something they could get back to doing. But who knows with the latest, I guess that counts as Bond adjacent news we can cover, is that some news broke that Barbara Broccoli is going to produce another play for Daniel Craig, and she's got some other non-Bond films lined up that she's going to produce. None of their non-Bond projects have ever turned a profit, but we'll see if she has to be on set for that, if that's going to cause more delays, because we're closing in on 3 years now since the last film, with rumors that they've been auditioning people, which I buy. I buy that they're doing that, but no real headway on terms of what a release date might be looking like, or a production date, I should say.
Yeah. Well, and I seem to recall reading a brief headline, Barbara Broccoli saying, don't cross your fingers or hold your breath because the new Bond isn't coming in the near future.
Right.
And they were saying they were possibly even like another 2 or 3 years out from pursuing the latest iteration, whatever that will happen to look like. But as the fan casting goes, and people talked about Idris Elba for the longest time taking over the mantle, and he's sort of aged out of it. He's acknowledged himself that he's not going to be able to come back, or wouldn't be able to do it. And now, like, how old is Henry Cavill going to be if that happens, or Tom Hiddleston if that happens, or if we'll get a complete unknown? We may not even know who the guy is. So it is something to look forward to, but Babs and her love affair with Daniel Craig is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's and this is only, and again, they've just, they did the TV show for Amazon, and they're doing another season of that. And it's been.
You watch it?
No, I don't have Prime.
Okay.
Basically, I got the sense from the previews that this is like The Amazing Race, except they're putting it on a streamer because it has a franchise tag. But the fact that she's waited 3 years nearly to do another play for Craig, it's like, don't hold your breath. It's like, if you really don't want to make these movies, then, I mean, I get Michael not doing it because he's getting up there now, but I don't know what's going on.
Well, and I think that there is sort of that fear that happens every time they sort of reinvigorate or recast the franchise. It is, does the world even need James Bond? As Judi Dench's M says in Goldeneye, you're a dinosaur of, I don't know, misogynist, and we hate you, and that gets to be the feeling every time they start to bring it back and say, do we need a masculine? Do we need the patriarchy to save the world? And it's like, yeah, it's kind of fun. It's a male fantasy, and it's women want him and men want to be him, and it can definitely work in the landscape, and sometimes it gives a shot in the arm to the action genre as a whole.
That's the thing, when people keep saying, is it relevant or not? And it's like, well, it wasn't even relevant when the first book came out in 1953 because the British Empire effectively collapsed at the end of World War II. It's like they had to continue their war rations until 1956. And then all Eisenhower had to do to put a stop to the Suez Canal crisis was threaten to dump the British pound in the open market. It's like British Empire, done. And so James Bond was essentially a, former British imperialist fantasy of Ian Fleming. But Richard Maybaum and others mined the best tidbits from that to make a really great franchise out of it. And because it's a fantasy franchise, we have gone over the fact that in virtually every Bond movie, there is a point where M would be calling in reinforcements rather than just trusting one guy to keep getting the job done. But this is a fantasy. So because it's a fantasy, then the question of relevance kind of goes out the window because it's a fantasy. So it really, in many missions of his concern, other things going on in the world, not just Britain. So the idea that people are still talking about that. I mean, I remember in the lead up to No Time to Die, so many articles about these people who were like, "Oh, Bond needs to end. It's crap." But they'd always preface the articles by saying, "Well, I've only seen like one or two of them." It's like, what are you talking about then? You know?
Well, and that tends to be something when franchises pop up again. I know that there are some detractors from No Time to Die. I personally, I've stated I loved it. All I wanted was spoilers. All I wanted was James Bond to die, and then it said James Bond will return. I was happy as a clam. But I think it's a great fantasy, power fantasy. I think it's a great style icon. And yeah, as people do become, I don't know, more reactionary. I don't want to say sensitive, but if you can find something to attack about something, people will do it. And that one has a target painted on its back just because of the age of the franchise and some of the tropes that it is employed. But I like seeing attractive people doing attractive things. And that includes Bond, certainly.
Yeah, that's been the general conceit of Hollywood since its inception. So it's not like it's unique to this franchise. Not to mention, people keep going back and judging movies like that in modern lenses rather than in the times that it was made, in which Bond movies were thought of taking a step forward for the type of roles they were giving women and people, all that kind of stuff. So it's like they're beating a dead horse at this point. But I don't know what. Again, I buy Michael needed to take time off, but I'm not sure what Barbara's deal is. Where it's like, okay, we're closing in on 3 years, but don't hold your breath. It might be another 3 years. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, and it's weird because it's like the Bond movies for the most part tend to be good, but the non-Bond films they do in general, it's not just that they don't make money. It's just that the writing and the teams they get just aren't very good. And I don't know what it is. It's sort of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, this franchise is working. Go to what is financially and culturally profitable for you, and maybe do that some other stuff some other time.
Well, I like the theory and that many actors and directors sort of have espoused over the years, and it's like one for you and one for me. So I can understand if you want to make a James Bond movie, then you go away, do another production, do a smaller production. It's like after the Avengers came out and Joss Whedon went and made A Midsummer Night's Dream or something like that. He just made like a backyard Shakespeare adaptation and then came back for Age of Ultron. So there is a possibility to be able to manage it. But again, this is like the Broccoli's. Eon probably has more money than God. And so they don't necessarily, it's more to keep it in the zeitgeist and keeping it more prevalent than it is the necessity to
yeah, and I agree.
Forward.
I agree with the one for you, one for me thing. It's just that from going off her comments recently, that means we're looking at 6 years before you even start thinking about doing another one, which is a long time. It's like,
yeah,
plenty of time to have done like 3 for me and maybe then 1 for us.
Oh, for sure. And as it was with License to Kill, like at this point, I'm not sure how far back it went, but it was fairly steady. You could set your watch to every 2 years there was a James Bond movie. And now with it becoming fewer and far between, I don't know. I still look forward to it. I don't feel entitled to getting the new James Bond. I'd like to see it before I happen to shuffle this mortal coil. But yeah, I appreciate that they're still moving forward with the film because it will be an event, and that's what I am proud of James Bond, or proud to be a James Bond fan, just because when it does show up, it is kind of like a cultural. It hits the zeitgeist. It hits a nerve. Everybody gets excited. It's like, oh, there's a new James Bond movie. But hang on a second, before I start gushing over License to Kill, I did want to say hello to our friends in the chat. Thank you for being here, Daniel's Hot Topics, who says this is going to be fun, and we said yes, it will be. Eugene Bird is here. Hello, Mr. Eugene Bird. How are you, sir? The guns are all miniatures in this film, except for the shoulder-launched anti-tank weapon, of course, and the harpoon. Okay, maybe I was wrong. There's a lot of giant guns in this. The very opening, the slow motion, almost like like Vietnam running from the helicopter kind of thing. There's a lot of gunplay in this. It's actually pretty cool. But yes, Pam Bouvier and Bond do have itty bitty little baby guns. The Batman says, hello, the Batman. Dalton rocked. Yeah, I agree. And goes on to say the closest Bond actor to Fleming's Bond. Totally. That is when I started reading the books, and I haven't read a lot of them, but when I started reading the books, the Bond that was in my head was always Timothy Dalton. And it fit that way for me. Eugene Bird says, cool intro. Yeah, thanks, Eugene. It's been a while since we got to use it. I do love that one. And I guess that's maybe why we're so upset about the lack of a Bond movie, is we want to use that title sequence more often. Hakeem is here. Hello, everyone. Congrats on the anniversary. Thank you. Daniel's Hot Topic says, Sean Connery was my favorite James Bond. And that, universal. It's universal. So much so that I used to, when I would ask.
At least in the first four.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Although I do have a soft spot for Diamonds Are Forever. But that was the way I would used to ask people, who's your favorite James Bond? And you can't say Sean Connery because it's always the easiest answer. The Batman says 007 will always have a place in the world. I'm hoping. We just got to start making them again. And Hakeem says, same here. I like Sean the best, followed by Daniel Craig. That's interesting. I think when we ranked, didn't we? We were pretty much bottomed on Daniel Craig. Phrasing, Scott, not bottomed, but like we didn't have him very high up, or at least I don't think I did.
I think I had him third after Pierce.
Oh, okay.
I think I'd have to go back and check. Well, actually, I'll just do it right now. So yeah, Sean was my favorite. Pierce was my second favorite, and then Craig, then Dalton, I think, and then Moore and Lazenby at the end. Even though I have a lot of childhood nostalgia for Roger Moore and all those movies, I agree with Connery's general summation that the Roger Moore films were almost like doing a parody version of the Connery version of the character, even though they're still fun.
Well, and I think that's also part of the maybe tepid response that Dalton got at the time. Obviously, that's aged better, and people have warmed to him over the years. But even watching this one, it's like Roger Moore would never be able to, he wouldn't have that character. It wouldn't be that gritty. It wouldn't be that sort of serious, intense even.
Yeah, you wouldn't even have that much action in it. Like we talked about in our View to a Kill review, how much better this movie would be if Timothy Dalton had been Bond in that movie.
Well, and yeah, especially with the physicality. Guy was 57, so.
Yeah.
The Batman says the last remaining masculine icon. I don't know, man. What if we get a Dredd movie? We'll get another Dredd movie. That's pretty masculine.
But this is more grounded than Dredd, though. I mean,
yeah,
he's a regular guy. He doesn't,
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that is also one of the things that they were trying to get away from, is making him such a superhero as, kite surfing a tsunami. And then you bring him down to earth with Casino Royale, which I really enjoy that one too. Daniel's Hot Topic says, M said that Bond is a relic of the Cold War. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Eugene Bird says, cool choices. Thank you. And then the Batman says, and then Bond went out and took out 006 and saved the world. Exactly. And that's the thing, is that you can make Bond somewhat of an underdog. And they did that with Daniel Craig by sort of showing the emotional side of him, and also with Dalton. But yeah, you put him in a box and then he breaks out. And the Batman says it looks like they still needed him. The Batman says No Time to Die was an abomination. I've heard that. I disagree, but that's cool, man.
I think it's a better adaptation of You Only Live Twice than the film's namesake from 1967.
Yeah.
And I think Fleming would have liked it because it ends the character.
And Cinematic Universe Ultimate. Hey, welcome. It would be unattractive to be unattractive. It is.
I guess so.
The Batman says, not interested in adding woke garbage to Bond.
Neither am I. There was none of that in that movie, so that's not a problem.
And that was the thing. And Yeah. I didn't find it woke, and I understand why people were sort of disappointed with it, but just in terms of you can't kill Bond, and I'm like, yeah, you can. It actually makes it kind of interesting. But the Batman says Barbara is so love struck on Craig that she makes me sick. It is kind of funny. And Christopher Nolan has wanted to do a Bond film, which would be interesting, but what is like just watching Inception?
He did Inception and Tenet, and
yeah.
Those were very plot-driven movies. I agree Inception had better character stuff with Dom and Maul, but Tenet was, like I said, the protagonist in Tenet is as shallow as his lack of a name implies. All of the characters are that shallow. And it's like you may as well have had Kenneth Branagh playing a Bond villain, essentially, but he's like mumbling his way through. Like it's got to feel theatrical and exciting. And while I love the puzzle box nature of that movie, it's everything's about plot devices and plot mechanics. Like it didn't feel fun, and you know what Nolan's style is, and that would have to permeate all the movies of the new actors era, and you know he's not going to stay on for all of those. So that would be it would be probably a one and done type thing if he did do it, even though he's, like you said, he's borrowed from those films shamelessly all over the years.
The Batman says there are rumors that they might take the series back to the classic 50s era in this next incarnation of the character. That's always been sort of a rumbling.
It'd be cool, but I don't think they'll do it.
Well, and I've also heard from people, it's like, why would you want a period 60s James Bond movie? There already is a 60s James Bond movie. There's like 5 of them. So it is kind of going back, but I enjoy, like, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. adaptation. I enjoyed.
Imagine if they go back to the 60s, but unlike the actual 60s Bond films, which were high fantasy, make it feel 60s gritty, like Craig movie, but trying to feel even more realistic and down to earth. Maybe that's what they mean by when people theorize that they would do that. Then again, you get away from the character if you do too much of that.
Well, and also, again, with people wanting to sort of be of a higher mind and a sensitivity to people, if you do put that distance of it being in the 1960s, you can sort of say, well, it's of the time, it's a period film, and so it's sort of a cloak of it's not my fault, it's not all that bad. Eugene Bird says they literally busted his balls in Casino Royale. True story. And the Batman absolutely loved Pam in this movie. Pam Bouvier is top 5 Bond girls of all time, maybe even top 3.
Not for me. I couldn't really stand either of them in this movie.
Lupe is, yeah.
We went over this in the review when we first did it, but I thought the cattiness between the two of them, I thought the ditziness between, what's her name, Lupe?
Lupe?
Lupe, I thought she was a bit kind of ditzy, not really there. Like, you belong more in a movie like From Russia with Love, right, or Dr. No, and not License to Kill. And I didn't buy the romance of the Pam Bouvier character. It's like, she's there, and she gets to do some stuff in the beginning, but she kind of gets away from the climax a bit because it becomes more about him at the very end, Because the thing is, if you're gonna pair him with somebody who's like another agent, then follow it through all the way through to the end. That was my big problem with Spy Who Loved Me, is that they spend so much time developing this working a romantic relationship between Bond and Triple X, and only to have her be, caught and a damsel on the side throughout the entire climax of that movie. And it's like, well, what was the point in doing that for the last hour if you're not going to use her? Whereas Pam Bouvier, I thought I thought she was fine. I wasn't over the moon about it. I was like, okay, I don't get it. Okay.
Well, and maybe it was just when I met her as a young man at those formative years, and I was like, that's a lady. So I thought, and also it's another one of those examples of, and it gets better as it goes along, because obviously you have Michelle Yeoh in Tomorrow Never Dies as Wei Ling, and the more capable, and obviously with Triple X, but I do like when the Bond girl does actually do something. And like Pam's piloting and stealing back money and giving hell to Wayne Newton. I don't know. I just think she's great.
Yeah, the Wayne Newton stuff, I admit, was funny. Enough so that they kind of borrowed that exact scenario for a Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah. But again, and that's sort of, it comes full circle to a certain extent, because it was Mission Impossible was sort of lifting off of the James Bond hype in the 60s, and then why not do it again? Why not just do that? Daniel's Hot Topic says, Scotty, remember when they made Never Say Never Again with Sean Connery? I hope they do another unofficial Bond movie like that with Pierce Brosnan. My first Bond. That would be kind of neat, I guess. Can they still make Thunderball?
No.
Just remake Thunderball again?
They can't. The Eon
McClory?
finally, well, after Kevin died 3 or 4 years later, the McClory estate sold all that to Eon, and they very quickly bought it. But we have seen Pierce Brosnan do other non-Bond related spy espionage movies where he gets to be like an agent and stuff.
Yes. And I've seen a couple of them. They are like Pierce Brosnan's still going strong. It would be interesting. There was a YouTube video, I think, and it was like James Bond, but it was drawn in the style of Sean Connery, but it was Sean Connery coming out of retirement as Bond for one final mission, which I think that would be kind of interesting. I don't know if Pierce Brosnan's too old to do that.
Can you resize the screen real quick? Are you seeing the big letterbox thing that's chopping? Or is that just me?
I think that's just you. Everything looks good on my end, and then it looks good on YouTube as well.
Oh, that's odd. Huh.
Where was I? Here we go.
Then they had him simping for what?
Here
then
we
they
go.
had him for one woman, not Moneypenny, for several films.
Well, yeah, but that was also, they wanted to give him the emotional weight. And I enjoyed Casino Royale. Quantum of Solace grew on me a little bit upon second viewing, but yeah, it does eventually just turn into the Daniel Craig is sad show. And that's why Eugene Bird continues, says, Daniel didn't do it for me for that reason. Yeah. Infinity is here. My favorite Bond is John Hamm. You can't steal my shtick, yo. And Sean Connery, Daniel's Hot Topic says, Sean Connery was a first-degree black belt in karate. However, he fights like a brawler. You don't see Connery shout, kill, ki, or I, when he fights, except in one scene, and You Only Live Twice. Ernesto says his list for Bonds is Brosnan, Connery, Craig, Dalton, Moore. Hey, first things first, they're all good Bonds, even in their varying degrees.
Notice how he forgot Lazenby, but that's...
No one forgets Lazenby.
Everybody forgets Lazenby.
They just leave him off the list. But speaking of Lazenby, that was something that he had announced recently. He said he was stepping away from public life. And I was like, what have you done lately, man? And it's no public appearances. He's not doing signings. He's basically, leave me alone. I'm retired now. So good for him.
Yeah, the last two things I saw him do was he posted to a social media page that he had when he went to see No Time to Die on opening night, and he commented about how he appreciated that they were using things from Majesty's, clearly playing on that in that movie. And the next thing I saw him do, I can't remember if it was before or after that, he went to like a James Bond fan club event on the East Coast.
Oh.
But that's it. It's like, so when he says I'm retiring from all public life, I'm like, I haven't been paying. I'm kind of hard pressed to think when's the last time, maybe, unless he had been doing something recently, I just didn't know about it. Maybe he does do signing or little shows. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Again, I hadn't seen him in much. I think I'd seen him in an episode of an Alfred Hitchcock Presents from the 80s. He was in a movie. Anyway, but usually he does play some sort of twist on his Bond persona. But
I meant like I know I've done he's other things in his career. I meant like in terms of recently, like in terms of that, like for him to suddenly mention, last week or whatever that I'm retiring from everything. It's like, oh, okay. Happy trails.
Yeah, exactly. You no longer have all the time in the world. But so with License to Kill, one of the things that I really wanted to highlight, because, and Eugene Bird pointed out, we have a money penny, but not really. This is like the most money penny has been sort of sidelined. She's there for one moment, and they don't even interact. Like Bond and Moneypenny don't even talk. So that's a little lackluster, but and we get Q. It's always a pleasure to see Desmond Llewellyn, and during the audio commentary, Desmond Llewellyn was saying that this was one of his favorite Bonds, just because he had such an enhanced role, because he didn't often get to go out into the field and be a part of the mission. He would just be in a sunken ship or in the middle of a pyramid or something.
Which brings up the one scene in the story, not the movie, but the one scene in the story that I really wanted to see that we don't get to see, which is when M inevitably calls Q back into his office at the end of this to catch up about what have you been doing.
Yeah, that would have been cool. But then it's all like, and also it is kind of funny at the very end in terms of things that are just sort of, okay, the movie's over. Now everybody's happy and scene. It's just like, yeah, no, Leiter had his leg bitten off, and he's sitting in the hospital being like, all right, I should be able to be out of the hospital by the time you get back to the Keys and we can go fishing. And it's like, you're very jovial for a man whose wife died.
And it seems like he's kind of flirting with the nurse and the
yeah. It is that is the one. It is the super duper happy ending where everybody gets what they want. Lupe gets to be with the deposed president, or however he's still.
I guess after all, he is going to get his honeymoon.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Benicio in this is wicked again.
Great. I wish Dario had a lot more screen time. I mean, I get why he does it for the story, because he knows that Bond's dirty from the beginning, but he's a great character.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And man, like again, when they turn up the menace and the grit in this, like it's great. And he goes out amazing in that choppy machine, whatever that was, for busting up the cocaine. It's just I love that bit. I love the grit and the gashes and blood that like Bond has obviously been beaten up through the climax. And also, it seems that David Hedison is the only man who has to have a pun on lighter whenever he's in the Bond movie, both times, because there is the little communicator, the cigarette lighter in the dash of the car in Live and Let Die, and then in this one he has the lighter from Della and Felix Leiter. And so I thought that I don't know why it took me this long to figure it out. I was like, there's always a lighter with David Hedison, so I thought that was cute. The Batman says, I would love to see Henry Cavill get a shot at the role. He proved he could do a good job with his appearance in the Mission Impossible franchise and is starring in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I really enjoyed The Man from U.N.C.L.E., except for I didn't like the climax with the hovercraft. I thought that was a little weak, but I really enjoyed it. The Batman says, if there was ever a guy that was almost born to play the part. Yeah, but I think like he's made such a name for himself for being like big and bulky. I'm wondering like, how do you lose that muscle without horrible repercussions?
And he did, yeah, he did lose. He was the finalist against Craig back in 2005.
What a different world it would have been.
Mm.
The Batman says Bond should never die. Well, there are a lot of people who agree with you. Again, I was tickled when it happened, but I think that people will be happy with the fact that since they've done it, and it was quite literally the last thing that I was thinking that would be shocking in a James Bond movie. Now they've done it, so they can't do it again. Yeah. So that's the plus side. Daniel's Hot Topic says it would have been interesting if Sean Bean would have been Bond. He was indeed the first pick of the studio to be Bond, but they went with Brosnan instead. How do you feel about Sean Bean playing James Bond? Now I know he was Alec Trevelyan, but
yeah, I mean, I've seen him. You know, he had that leading show, Sharp's Rifles, back then. But I'm having a harder time picturing him as the lead. As Bond. I mean, as Dark Side Bond and everything was good, but I'd have to see it. That's a hard one.
Yeah, like I think there's something that I know he was charming and sharp, but that was sort of like a rugged kind of not gentleman suave spy. There's always been something a little severe to Sean Bean in my mind, and that's why when he plays like a fatherly protector or pleasant individual, I'm just like, this is weird.
Or even on Snowpiercer TV show where he's trying to play this high society type, cultured type. I mean, even though he's the bad guy, it's like seeing him in that high cult. It just kind of evokes villain anyway.
Yeah, there's just something about him.
Whereas when he plays heroes, they're kind of rugged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, and they inevitably die. But this was again, I was watching it today, going through the audio commentary, talking about the filming in Mexico City, and the budgetary issues that they were, because it was originally like they were thinking of doing something in China, and then the production just all got switched over to Mexico City. I think, how do you feel about Isthmus being our primary location?
Well, that was a typical thing that movies did back then. All movies in the 80s and the 90s would come up with these fictional, Caribbean or South American, other island nations or whatever as substitutes for these, what were clear, 80s very American action movies, like Iran-Contra, commenting on that kind of stuff, or Cuba, but we don't want to get political about it, so we're just going to come up with a fake name and think the audience won't notice. But reality, the audience doesn't care. It's like they may as well have mentioned that the country was El Salvador or Colombia in the Bond movie, and I don't think anybody would have batted an eyelash, except maybe the people of those countries. But it's okay. Isthmus, it's a nice location. It's a different, I guess, feel for a Bond movie. So.
Big thank you to Eugene Bird.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. Thank you.
Little Dancing You Are Amazing sticker. Thank you so much. I don't know why StreamYard won't show it, but I do appreciate it, sir. Thank you very, very much. But yeah, it was like, what was it in Batman? It was the Cordo Maltese. And in this one, it was Isthmus. Yeah. But yeah, no, and I thought like I enjoyed the location. It still holds that exotic James Bond travelogue-esque sort of idea. But I think part of the reason why I enjoyed this movie so much is because when Bond busts up the cocaine in the little submarine, steals the money. It's, again, you usually have super heroic spy power fantasy. And in this one, you get that sort of Brewster's Millions. Okay, I'm a millionaire now, because you never really worried about where Bond got his cash. And this time, when he's cut out, it's like he absconds $5 million, and it's like, yay, you can do whatever you want. And I do like that he still gets to live up to his high society gentlemanly ways. And it's like, well, who's paying for this? And it's like, well, drug dealers, which is great. Steal from the drug dealers. James Bond will take care of
him. Very true.
Oh. The Batman says, Q getting into the field and dealing with Pam's jealousy over Bond was hilarious. I loved Q in this one quite a bit. Yeah, I did too. And he was sort of, well, and this is kind of the one where there'd always been sort of an animosity. Q was always frustrated with James Bond and his immature ways, or at least that's the way it was played by Desmond Llewellyn for Connery and Moore. And I like this one where there was actually a begrudging respect, an almost fatherly presence, especially with Pam.
Yeah, that
Nolan,
was getting into
sure.
soap opera territory for me a bit, but it was funny.
Nolan's Bond could be like GoldenEye, start with a bang and pass the baton. Well, I wonder if they would get Martin Campbell again.
They should. You know, everything comes in threes.
Yes.
And one of his terms is that he would only do the first in a new series of Bond movies, not one of the others. He would want to set the tone.
Yes. And he does. And when he does, well, 2 for 2. And so we just don't talk to anybody about Green Lantern. The Batman says, I agree with you 100% on Anya Amasova. Cat? Yeah. In terms of her just being a damsel in distress for Stromberg at the end. Xenia wins above all. That's why she's on the top. Yeah. I do. I love Famke.
Oh, yeah. Who didn't love her in that movie?
The Canadian Admiral. Well, actually, he did love her. The Batman says Brosnan was woefully underrated as Bond, mostly due to him being so let down with the writing during his tenure. He was the first person I thought was basically born to play the role. Yeah. Well, and like that would have been not my first Bond, but I definitely the one that first Bond movie that I ever saw in the theater would have been No Time to Die. And
wait, really? You mean Die Another Day?
Yeah, Die Another Day. My mistake.
Yeah.
Or no, Tomorrow Never Dies.
Oh, Tomorrow Never Dies. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, there are a lot of titles. Live and Let Die. I don't know. So, but yeah, and he was great, and I think he was like the epitome of obviously it was the 90s Bond, but yeah, I prefer Brosnan over Moore, who was the epitome of the 80s. Taylor Swift, greater than Disney, Star Wars, and MCU, and Doctor Who. Matt G is in the house. Thank you for being here, sir. Taking time out of your day. Finity says, Lazenby is the best Bond in my book, and don't forget it. I won't. Hey, these bold statements, that is what makes it interesting. And that's, again, getting together and being able to talk about James Bond and then not having to say that, have a funeral for a franchise or something ridiculous like that. It's like, yeah, if you don't like Lazenby, you don't like Lazenby. That's cool. If you don't like Dalton, you don't like Dalton. There's much more to choose from. It's all good. And we're all here just to celebrate the Bond. But if you're a George fan, my hat is off. The Batman says, Craig was a tad too thuggish for me. I like my Bond debonair and with some charm. I get it that Bond hates his job in some ways and doesn't enjoy killing, but Craig was downright depressing. Agreed. I do feel that as well. I thought the action scenes were good, but I remember I knew a guy who, after Casino Royale came out, he said he went and saw it and he hated it because James Bond doesn't chew with his mouth open. And it was like, that is your definition. That is what you care about when it comes to James Bond. Okay, table manners. All right. But in The Living Daylights,
he was upset that he did have table manners then.
He didn't. Apparently, he was too thuggish to he was eating the caviar improperly, and I was like, okay, all right. Daniel's Hot Topic says Lazenby is still around and he is quitting public appearances. That is what Connery did before he passed away. Well, and I did see a picture of Lazenby. Do you know how old he is?
I can double check, but I think in Connery's case, he quit public appearances long before he died. Yeah. So that's not an indicator of any kind, I don't think. It could be that he's just, just not interested anymore, perhaps. Let's see. Keep going. I want to look this up.
For sure. Daniel's Hot Topic says, I hope they connect all the Bond movies together someday. They can do it. They can either say James Bond is a code name, and they can have all the guys who were Bond in pictures on MI6, which is the best.
No. That doesn't work for the Craig era because it's not a code name; it's his real name.
Yes.
And they did reference Robert Brown and Not Bernard Lee, but there was the other guy. What was his name? I can't remember.
The other M, yes.
Yeah, in The Office and No Time to Die, when M is sitting sitting there, you see Robert Brown, and then the other. Maybe it was Bernard Lee there too, because there's three guys around. Because you remember when Bernard Lee passed away, and they didn't want to have M in the next one, so they had it be like three different guys or two different guys.
Yes.
They had like the second one, the shorter guy with like the low cut hair. I can't remember his name. Yeah, they had their pictures on the wall. No Time to Die, and it's like, oh, it's kind of like a fourth wall break. Sort of like how Die Another Day, they had all the gadgets from the previous Bond movies.
Yeah.
Even though it's clear that Bond is not old enough to have used all those the Pierce Brosnan Bond obviously isn't old enough to have gone on all those adventures and used all those gadgets. It's like a fun little thing for fans, but I don't see how that would even logically work. Yes, it would have to be a codename situation, but how do you then explain once you go through all the MQ and Moneypenny, because Moneypenny, I guess that's a code name now too, but why would a secretary have a code name? It's like,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and the License to Kill does sort of, and in the same way that For Your Eyes Only does, it references back to Tracy. This one more casually, when after the wedding, Della throws the garter belt, and Felix says, well, he was married once, but that was a long time ago. And so it still is the maintaining of the same person.
That was also in the Roger Moore version, where in For Your Eyes Only, when he goes to leave flowers at Tracy's grave.
Right.
Even though he's clearly too old to have been the Lazenby Bond, because they even show her gravestone dying 1969. And it's like, well, this is now 1981, and he's clearly he wouldn't have been that young at the time. Right. And I just checked, Lazenby will be 85 in September.
Yeah, and that is, I appreciate your concern in terms of when Connery stepped away from public life, but I think that just happens to be when people retire, they usually without.
It might have been a tax evasion thing in Connery's case.
That's that's also a possibility. The Batman says that was a fan theory that has been going around for several years. Barbara and Michael crushed it recently. Yeah, I did see they were like, no, it's the same guy. Although I don't have, in terms of the continuity between the Bond films, I find it episodic, and I don't necessarily need it all to be intertwined.
Yeah, like when they even in the Roger Moore eras, when they have like a wink and a nod to one of the earlier ones, it's more like a fun thing for fans, like a fourth wall break. It's not. It's like George Miller, when people were bugging him about, oh, you have Tom Hardy as Max. Does that mean it's a sequel? Is it a prequel? What does this mean? He's like, guys, it's a Mad Max movie. Just enjoy it. Just take it. It is what it is. And that's how I always approach the Bond movies up until the Craig era. And granted, the Connery era did have somewhat of an arc in the first 5 films as well.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's just kind of a fun thing. I don't think too hard about it. It's just they're just fun movies.
Yeah, and this is gonna bake your noodle. Or Daniel continues, they can introduce the multiverse in the next Bond movie. Okay, I'm not even gonna
no multiverse. We're done with multiverses. Not great. Doesn't work. We've seen that. We've just seen that. Literally, Kevin Feige just approved the creation of a movie which mocks the entire conceit of a multiverse and why it does not work. And we're not entering the James Bond multiverse. But thank you for your enthusiasm, Daniel.
Okay, and that continues it on.
Oh God, pulled the other Bonds from the one. You did go the CGI Tarkin route from Rogue One to bring back all the Bonds together in a No Way Home Bond movie.
There you go. Or you could start remaking the James Bond movies with the incorrect Bond actors. So you get like Dalton doing Goldfinger, Lazenby does GoldenEye. Just CGI them. We can AI this shit. It'll be great.
Yeah, that's how we'll get our Dalton version of View to a Kill.
There you go.
AI this shit. You should trademark that.
The Batman says Craig was pretty buff as Bond, and new guy that is leading the rumor mill to be the next Bond, Aaron Taylor Johnson, just uploaded a photo with him in the gym, and he's really buff now too. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking of like Moore and Brosnan in their first outings, and they were fairly thin. They weren't really the muscular, like I guess the broadest barrel chest was Connery.
No, because Craig was when you had that shot of him coming out of the ocean in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know Aaron Taylor Johnson's been kind of in multiple franchises now, but he's still not really a household name necessarily. So he could potentially be in the running still. I could see that.
But I don't know. There's something. He has been in a couple of things. Obviously, he was Quicksilver. He was in the Godzilla movie. He's going to be Kraven the Hunter. I don't know.
We all know what's going to happen to that movie.
Yeah. It's going to be a meme. Yeah. The Batman says Sean Bean almost always dies in as his character, so he probably would have been the first Bond to die in a movie. Yes.
I think somebody actually did a breakdown of that, and it turns out he only dies in like a third of his movies, but the third of the movies that he dies in are the big major popular movies that everybody knows. Because he does a lot of stuff on like the independent circuit that a lot of us don't see or hear about, that I'll see pop up on streaming every once in a while, or pop up on digital movie rental options that are like independent things that don't even get theatrical releases, where he's just like a regular guy. But yeah, you're right. He does him on the idea that he's going to die in every movie that he's in. But if they kill him, they'll find ways to bring him back. When they kept bringing him back in flashbacks in Lord of the Rings, you know.
Oh, there you go. Ernesto says, funny enough, Puerto Rico has been playing the part of Cuba for decades. Yeah.
That's true. It has been.
The Batman says Martin Campbell is awesome. Well, I certainly like his Bond films.
Mm-hmm.
Ernesto says Canadian Admiral is Scotty's alter ego. I wish. I have no such rank. I am but a simple 37. The Batman. This never happened to the other fella. That'd be something to go. It should. What am I thinking? On Her Majesty's Secret Service, was that released in 1969?
Yeah.
So that it's got an anniversary this year, a round number anniversary here as well.
55
in
December.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to tune back in December. And Daniel's Hot Topic says, sometimes I think Bond does enjoy killing a bit too much. He shows no mercy. Well, but that was something that was in The Living Daylights, where it was, the world-weary James Bond. And Roger Moore was sort of the one who pushed it, that he does have a license to kill, but he doesn't like killing.
I think part of that was also just Roger Moore's personal taste that they were catering to as well. Because, like, he had a problem with Zorin killing all his henchmen in the mine in A View to a Kill. It's like, but he's the villain. And Bond villains always betray their henchmen. There's nothing new about that. But something about seeing that and raw and felt realistic, he's not really a fan of that. So I could see how that kind of, as we've seen, the Bond actors sometimes, for better or worse, have more of an influence on stories than maybe they should. And you see the results. So that's there. Oh, speaking of anniversaries, Moonraker's having its 45th this year.
Oh, nice.
This summer. We missed it, but we already missed this one too, so we can do it. Hell, we can do it next week for fun.
Yeah. But when if we do talk Moonraker, we would have to get Tony on.
Yes.
Just because we'd have to discuss the possibility of either a remake or a true adaptation.
Yes.
Ernesto says, so was Craig eating the caviar, or was he eating the caviar? Yes. The Batman says Robert Brown was the second M actor. Yeah. But I
don't think the guy I'm thinking of ever became M. I think he was just
wasn't he just like the Minister of Defense?
I think that's right. I think he's kind of short. Yeah, him. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah. I think there was a portrait, because I know there was a portrait of, maybe it was both Bernard Lee. I know for a fact Robert Brown's portrait was in No Time to Die. Maybe it was Bernard Lee up there as well. I thought maybe the Minister of Defense might have had a portrait up there too, but maybe not.
Well, and at that point, it was sort of the conceit had been had been sort of dispensed with. It was like they obviously had changed M's, and then Judi Dench, they acknowledged that. I hear the new head of MI6 is a lady. And then it became okay to start showing all the other different M's in references. Like there is a Bernard Lee, I think, and then there's the Robert Brown. But I think Bernard Lee was in, I want to say with the one in Spectre. There was a portrait of Bernard Lee in Spectre, and then Robert Brown was acknowledged in No Time.
That's it. And then the fact that they brought Judi Dench from the Brosnan era over to the Craig era, because they're like, how can we not? It's like, we're not going to let a little technicality like that stop us from bringing in a great. And she had a great introduction in Casino Royale too, where she's like, this agent did something this crazy. She had the good sense to defect. Christ, I missed the Cold War.
Yeah. And I appreciated that in terms of the continuity, or at least it's not even continuity. It's just being self-referential, because it doesn't really like Pierce Brosnan would have been, a baby. He wouldn't have been able to meet Bernard Lee, but I'm glad that there is sort of that your predecessor kind of idea. The Batman says Lazenby referenced gadgets from previous Connery entries as well. Their continuity would make no sense if Bond was a code name. Yeah. And this is difficult. You would also have to reconcile Tracy and Vesper. Well, I don't even think it would be. You don't really have to reconcile Vesper, because Vesper can die in the first mission, and then he meets Tracy. It's Madeline Swan that really throws a monkey in the wrench.
Well, no, because the Craig era is its own self-contained thing with a beginning, middle, and end.
Yes.
And that's its own continuity kind of thing by itself. So
yeah. Well, and that, with the death of Bond at the end of No Time to Die, spoilers. And it does sort of. I used to just pepper them in. I would pepper them throughout wherever I wanted. But yeah, you're right. It's just basically a side tome. There's the Bond proper, and then there's the Craig era. And hopefully we'll get back to something that's a little bit more movie. Let's make a movie. We don't necessarily have to cross over. No multiverse, no sequel. We'll just James Bond will return and we'll call it a day.
Yeah.
The Batman says, in my headcanon, you have to fudge time, make the 60s movies kind of take place in a different era, and upgrade some of your tech in your brain. Well, and they do, like, you played the video games, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do that. Like, even with the GoldenEye remake, they did that, and they had Daniel Craig voice it, and they change all the technology and stuff. It's playable. It's decent.
Yeah, same with the From Russia with Love video game.
Yeah. That I wish I could get my hands on that. I would love to play it as the final performance of Sean Connery as Bond.
Mm.
The Batman says Michael stated that in his mind, each new Bond actor is a separate 007 continuity, not necessarily interconnected. It is clear that Broccoli and Saltzman were going for continuity between actors first.
Right.
And yeah. But that's also like, I don't know. I don't have to fit it all together and make it perfectly mesh. Yeah. I'm happy with it. Daniel's Hot Topic says Aaron Taylor Johnson is a horrible actor. Well, I'm trying to think of something that I've seen him in that I actually was jazzed for. That he was. Well, I guess I liked the first Kick-Ass, but that also he doesn't really scream, "Hey, this guy should play Bond" in that film.
I liked him in Bullet Train.
Oh,
definitely
nice.
Being proper British in that.
The Batman says Connery was a former bodybuilder. Yes, and he was. Yeah, like when I say I'm thinking of slight Bond actors, like in terms of being thin. Maybe it's also 60s buff is the same kind of idea. Have a steak and a glass of milk kind of guy. But yeah, by the time we get to the 2000s and Daniel Craig, definitely had a regime or a regimen for his athletics. Ernesto says, now I want to see Moore's Bond get his balls crushed by Le Chiffre or turn the tables on Silva in that seduction scene. Definitely not his first time. That would be kind of let's AI this shit. Let's get Roger Moore doing Daniel Craig stuff. That'd be great. Roger Moore running up the crane in Casino Royale. Like, that's hilarious. I want to see that. The Batman says, in the Fleming novels, you get much more of his psychology and inner thoughts. He broods a lot about not liking the killing. Yeah, and I appreciate that in terms of when, well, he was at the end of Casino Royale, he was going to quit.
Yeah, and the thing is, in the books, he didn't actually kill that many people because there wasn't nearly as much action because it was like a secret agent story. Mm-hmm. And the movies are the one that add in all the action scenes and rework the plot to accommodate that.
Yes, there was no space station in Moonraker. Batman says, I think you might be thinking of the character William Tanner, the chief of staff. Bernard Lee was pictured in the MI6 office when they were honoring Bond's memory in No Time to Die. Great nod. Yeah, yeah. How many Tanner actors have there been? Two Tanners?
Yeah, there are two Tanners. There's the one from GoldenEye who's like, oh yeah, the evil queen of numbers is going to play her game. And then there's the one that Rory Kinnear plays. But no, I think the Batman, Scott got it right. It was actually the Minister of Defense from the last few Roger Moore movies. And I don't remember if he was in the Dalton movies. I don't think he was.
I have to check. It's been a while since I've seen The Living Daylights. He wasn't in License to Kill. Okay. But that's really had nothing to do with the British government. So, but I did what I did on my summer vacation, the James Bond movie. Great. Batman says Taylor Johnson was good in Bullet Train. Not a good choice for Bond, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, I haven't seen him do things like I didn't like him in the Godzilla movie. I didn't really like him as Quicksilver. I liked him in Bullet Train. I thought he was funny in The Fall Guy because he's supposed to be playing an idiot, and that kind of worked. But honestly, I haven't seen him in much outside of that. So I admit when I saw him in Bullet Train, I'm like, oh wow, that guy is a lot better now. But I don't know, maybe not for Bond. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, and again.
But even less likely now, I think it's safe to say he won't get it if Barbara's saying it's going to be another 3 years before they even, pick up shop. Because he's already, 36, 38 or something. So they want somebody, I think, who's going to be younger, who can be around for a while, like somebody probably in their early 30s. So
yeah. Well, famously, I think it was Henry Cavill was up for the role, not only for Craig, but wasn't he up for it with Brosnan? And he auditioned, and he was even like, I'm too young. Same with Dalton. Dalton was approached, and he's like, I'm too young. Right.
And then in the funny thing is in Casino Royale, the reason they told him they didn't give him the role is that he was giving him Superman vibes too much.
Wow.
Which, of course, that worked out, sort of. But yeah, so that's why that went that way. But you're right, Dalton. They even approached Dalton as early as Live and Let Die, and he's like, "No, I'm too young for this."
Yeah.
Hello, Jill.
Hello, Jill. Good to see you. And Eugene Bird says, "Hey, number one, you missed Kat laughing harder than we've ever heard her." Because and we're gonna clip it. Don't worry. Ernesto says the one thing that keeps me from considering Johnson as Bond is that his voice isn't deep enough. That makes sense. There is like a perfect. There's a perfect storm of qualities that an actor has to sort of embody to be James Bond, and I don't know. As I've always said, when you sit down in the theater and the lights go down, that's when you find out whether or not you're going to get a good Bond. But there's something about it doesn't vibe for me with Aaron Taylor Johnson. The Batman says Moonraker is one of the best books in the series, but not one of the best movies in the series. I still find it good fun and one of the most famous example of the Mandela effect in it. Yes. Hashtag Dolly. Ernesto says he's 34. Isn't Bond supposed to be a senior agent? Craig was 38 and he looked quite youthful, all things considered. Well, and that, yeah, and so I didn't realize he was 34. And if that is the way it goes, it makes sense that they would start him off at 34. It depends on how many movies you can make, and we're signing the actor on to be in multiple films. But if you're only making one every 4 years, then by the time he's 44 or 46, we've only got like 3 movies. And so you're basically down to just a trilogy with each new Bond, unless they can pick up the production. And I don't know what the profitability on it would be. Although, if you do keep it special and make these movies events, then hopefully that is the audience wanting more. Daniel's Hot Topic says, damn it, if Brosnan was in Casino Royale, it wouldn't have been a reboot, but a continuation. But he wanted too much money, priced himself off the market. I don't think it was a matter of he priced himself off the market.
No, he didn't. What happened was he went down to the Bahamas to film another movie after the sunset. And Barbara Michael, despite that Die Another Day made more money than any Bond film at that time, knew that they jumped the shark a bit much. They got the Casino Royale rights back, and they said, we need to do something more grounded to save the series because it's becoming, like, yeah, it was financially successful, but it's becoming parody. And they did not want to give him the chance to do that because, to the Batman's point, his films have been let down by the writing. And it's like, after you did all this crazy shit and Die Another Day, is the audience going to buy a complete reinvention of the character by him? Which the answer is yes, because Brosnan is good enough, but they didn't trust that. And Brosnan says he got a very weird phone call out of the blue where Barbara's crying and Michael's kind of doing his best to translate between her tears. And it was a very unprofessional, oh, we're moving on, bye. And just hung up and very unceremonious, and that was it. But no, it was not a money thing on his part.
No, and it was, and there's that documentary, and we've referenced it on other shows before. Is it called Everything or Nothing? The Story of James Bond, and they do talk about that. And Brosnan is like, "Yep, they just said we're doing something different." So, but yeah, the Batman says Brosnan was fired from the role. Essentially, he was forced out. Broke my heart for him. I always thought it was a little strange. Just the how quickly it was just he's gone, he's out. All right. Ernesto says, when the argument could be made that filming 2 movies back to back would be worthwhile experiment strategy.
In the current climate of them taking years and years between making movies, then yeah, I think that would be, if they're standalone films, then I think that would be a good idea. Because yes, every Bond villain's plan is reflecting current events in some way, but there's enough stuff going on in the world to come up with like even 3 plots for Bond movies that could be set around the same time. So yeah, I think you could save a lot of time and money by just shooting the 2 of them back to back and, you know, spacing out or something.
Well, and I'm just
Provided
thinking
the contracts are good enough for your bank loans.
Yeah, but I was also thinking, like, one of the reasons that they do that sort of film 2 or 3 movies back to back, like Lord of the Rings or Back to the Future, like, isn't that usually to save money on locations as well?
Yeah, and it saves just the hassle of bringing all the equipment back out there and building the sets again, and, you know, all that stuff that you're doing 2 or 3, and taking all the sets back down and getting the infrastructure out there for the catering and all that kind of crap. And it's like, or we just bash it all out right now and just be done with it. And it saves a lot of time, which is why Rings, they shot all 3 of those films in 14 months, which is unbelievable. But they had 5 or 6 units going at any given time. And Peter would have to look at the video village for like 5 hours at the end of the day, monitoring all the different dailies to see what they got. So that's like not enviable way to make a movie, but damn, it paid off for them.
I just can't imagine the difficulty from an actor. Like, I know that they film out of sequence. It's not like a chronological filming of the movie. But just to know where your head is supposed to be at, where your emotions are and everything like that, you really have to, you have to be very, very aware of what scene is when in the movie. And can be completely different from the thing that you just shot. It's difficult for, I know it's a craft, it's art, but it does make me it makes me go cross-eyed. But if they could make two, I would say if they could make 3 back-to-back in 14 months, that would be great. And then just release them once a year while you're doing the next. You can use so you take 14 months, 18 months, film 3 movies, release them over the course of 3 years. It would be arduous, but then just jump right back into it while the movies are being released. You're making the next 3, and that's your tenure as Bond. You get 6 movies, you're done.
Yeah.
Kind of cool. Although that is, like you said, in terms of contracts and whatnot, that is a risky endeavor, or it can be. The Batman says that Eon documentary was great. I really enjoyed it myself. Yeah. Very candid. It was like they didn't pull punches. I liked it. Daniel's Hot Topic says, I remember in 2005 when they introduced the new Bond and they had Daniel Craig brought in by boat and he had a dumb smile on his face and it was like, boo, bring back the real James Bond. Yeah, but then
what does that mean? The smile on his face?
Well, he was kind of smug and he was blonde. Everyone was pissy because he was blonde, and he didn't really. And I think that was he wearing like a life preserver, and it was like Bond wouldn't wear a life preserver, and it's like, well, yeah, character. This is an actor. It's okay. But I still, when I saw Casino Royale the first time, I had a huge smile on my face. Still do when I watch it. Loved it. So that's why I've always, and I continue to beat my drum saying, we really don't know until we sit in the theater and check out and see what the new Bond is like. The Batman says, and people made fun of him for wearing a life jacket in it. Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one remembered that. He was likely told to wear it. Yeah. He's on the Thames. There's police boats everywhere. Daniel's Hot Topic really wants this multiverse. The Batman says he came off not very Bond-like. It was the Bond-like was the criticism. Yes, that's true. Casino Royale is one of the best films in the series. Absolutely, I agree with that, and I think it's also one of the closest adaptations of the books too.
I agree with that.
Ernesto says you walk into a bar, Brosnan, Craig, Connery, Moore, Dalton, and Lazenby are at the table. You challenge them to see who can seduce a random girl the fastest. Who wins and at what speed?
Well, if we're talking about actual seduction, it'll probably be, I want to say Brosnan, because Connery's was more like he would just get right in their face and say a line, and if it worked or not, he would already be putting his hands on.
Yes.
I think it would be Brosnan.
I think it would be Brosnan.
Yeah, Brosnan's got the charm. Like the Batman said, he's born to play Bond.
Mm-hmm. And the Batman says Moore or Brosnan wins. I'm with you on that one. But I lean more towards Brosnan simply because he wasn't 57. Old man Bond, old wrinkly Bond, seducing. What's the name of the lady from
He was 45 when he started.
That's true. That's true.
Tanya Roberts is who you're thinking of.
Tanya Roberts is who I'm thinking of. Absolutely. And Eugene Bird says Lazenby's got great hair, though. It's true, but those ears, something about those ears, they stick out like 2 doors on a taxi cab. Oh. But when it comes to between, I think we're gonna wrap it up pretty soon. But I just wanted to get your thoughts, not just with I
thought we'd talk more about License to Kill. We haven't talked much about that movie for the video.
Well, no, but and the thing with, well, sure. I'm just thinking of in terms of the 2 that we do get from Dalton. Which do you prefer, License to Kill or Living Daylights?
I think Living Daylights. I did
Because
like
that's
the
more
story.
traditional.
Well, not that it was traditional. I just liked this how the story was very Cold War espionage type of. It wasn't your typical supervillain trying to take over the world thing, like or whatnot. As you've seen, there was no megalomaniac, so to speak. I mean, yeah, Brad Whitaker's out to lunch, but he's not like trying to take over the world or anything like that. And yeah, Robert Davi, I think, is a great Bond villain as Sanchez. But my thing is that it's a revenge story, and at the end of that movie, you barely get a hint of a reaction from him before he bursts into flames. It's like that's the juiciest part of a revenge story, when the bad guy knows who it is that's screwing him over and why. That's where you really feel it and love to get to enjoy it when they die. But that he looks at the lighter and it's like, is it clear that he even recognizes what this is? And then boom, he's just gone. It's like, oh, that was fast.
Well, and I remember you had that criticism when we were discussing it the first time, and I thought that it may not have been overt because it does sort of glint in the sun, but yeah, I got the shock from Sanchez when he sees the lighter. Although, and this is where I do get where you're coming from. It may not be the inscription on the lighter. It may be the fact that he's doused in gasoline and someone is brandishing fire. So
Also, to your point about how Felix isn't even remotely bothered by what's going on, it's like they felt the need to add the subplot about smuggling the warheads to raise the stakes.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's cool. But if this revenge story is going pretty well, you should be invested enough in the revenge aspect of the story that you don't need to necessarily raise the stakes. I mean, it's nice, but it felt like that became the focus of the climax, trying to stop the missiles from getting where it's like this started as a guy going rogue to go after a drug dealer because he's trying to avenge his friend, and now it's become like a quasi, save the. And I get it, it's James Bond; he kind of has to do something, but I like when it's more. Like if you're gonna do it, because there've been other low stakes Bond films before, like From Russia with Love, they're really good. Well, I mean, we both were a little mixed on that, but in terms of having good reception, but I don't know, I thought lean more into the revenge fact that this guy, you're catching this guy, you've almost got him. I'm gonna avenge Felix, and then to see that Felix has completely moved on from it. On top of that, it's like, oh.
But I think that was, and I do enjoy the Stinger missiles and obviously the international drug trade, which would be of importance to, well, at the very beginning of the movie, the DEA. And up until the point when the ninjas show up. Like, come on, ninjas, awesome. At that point, I really didn't get the sense that anyone was actively pursuing Bond. And I didn't feel like there was a larger James Bond story going on. And so when we do get the Stinger missiles and like there is more, not interference, but like James Bond is interfering with the other investigations and pursued by MI6, that's when it was really like the walls were closing in on him. And I didn't feel like it was like another subplot to raise the stakes, but basically continuing the promise of, may God help you, Commander, because you are on your own. Everything is revoked. And then to be able to like complete or dismantle the drug organization and get the Stinger missiles, that kind of vaguely says, okay, you can come back to the MI6 now.
Yeah.
So I thought it did. It's not like it isn't the Deus Ex Machina of, oh, I guess you have a job again, James. It's like he actually did do stuff to warrant being welcomed back into the service. I thought that was pretty cool. The Batman says, Maud Adams commented that Moore could charm all the Bond ladies into bed. She loved his classiness. Brosnan had it in spades as well. Absolutely. The Batman says, The Living Daylights is one of my faves. And Ernesto says, which Bond is the best rogues gallery? In contrast, who had the best row of Bond girls? Oh, that's Connery. Connery had the best rogues gallery.
Yeah, he's got Dr. No, he's got Red Grant, Rosa Klebb, Odd Job,
Goldfinger.
Goldfinger, Largo, Blofeld, Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd, and another Blofeld, Bambi and Thumper. As far as the girls,
I kind of want to give that to Brosnan.
yeah, I was thinking the same thing because you have Xenia, Natalia, Wei Lin,
Paris Carver,
who should have been
Christmas Jones.
Christmas Jones. Well, Sophie Marceau.
Yes.
Sophie Marceau especially, and then and Halle Berry and Rosamund Pike. So I would give it to Brosnan.
Yes. Although Moore did get Maud Adams twice, so that is a benefit. Daniel's Hot Topic says The Living Daylights was more fun, and License to Kill was a darker, more adult Bond, which is enjoyable. Yeah, I like the shakeup. I like the sort of divergent tone from being, as you said, or as Connery said, not the sort of lighthearted quasi parody. And I liked this grounded. But yeah, License to Kill was darker. And I have nothing stopping me from revisiting The Living Daylights, but I would like to. The Batman says, I took it that he recognized it. Yeah, I did too, with the lighter just before he goes ablaze. But yeah, I that's what I was under the impression of. Daniel's Hot Topic says, Scotty, I found License to Kill and For Your Eyes Only at Dollarama for $3. I love that they still sell DVDs at Dollarama. Every now and then I'll see something and it's like, all right, nice. Batman says, I agree with Kat. They needed to stay more about Bond. We will. I don't know. I agree with Kat. They needed to say more about Bond's revenge for Leiter and his bride. Yeah.
Because that's kind of what the driving force is of this whole movie, even after M issues them that threat and he takes off anyway. Oh, here's another question.
Yes.
Do you think they should have stuck with the original title, License Revoked?
No.
Really?
I like License to Kill just because it is sort of iconic. Everyone knows James Bond has a license to kill.
But see, that's just it. It's like, yeah, everybody knows Jason, he has a license to kill, but what's the unique thing about this movie is that he's basically, had his license revoked.
Yeah. I like that it's License to Kill. I kind of get the same sort of feeling that the title for On Her Majesty's Secret Service kind of thing. Like it is.
That's true. Yeah, that's another non-title.
Yeah. It just sort of, this is the backdrop for what the adventure is going to be.
That's what I've been hearing from a lot of people, that the next one, regardless of what it's about, needs to be called On His Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah, yes.
No, that'll just be a thing that people will get confused by with wordplay, and we don't need to do that.
Right. And yeah, it would obviously shoulder too many comparisons with On Her Majesty's Secret Service as well.
Yeah.
Daniel's Hot Topic says, I like the female ninja in License to Kill. That was cool. Yeah. Oh, and it was so sad when the guy dies. Don't let them take you alive. And then, and they don't. Daniel says, Scotty, remember that hot blonde actress in Octopussy? She could have been the main Bond girl, but that went to Maud Adams. The hot blonde woman went with Q in the end. Oh, was she like one? Yeah, she was one of Octopussy's sidekicks. I forget. I want to say Jenny Flex, but Jenny Flex is from a different.
She could have been the main. Like, was she on the table for that role, or?
Well, remember when I think maybe just in terms of judging the woman based on her beauty, she was attractive enough to be the main. Now, there is a deleted scene. I didn't get a chance to see it, and I don't want to dangle it in front of the copyright peoples. There is a deleted moment. It's not even a scene, but after they bring back Sharky, and he's killed with a bunch of other sharks, and Bond goes with the harpoon and shoots him, and it's like, this is for Sharky. There is a cut of like Bond laughing maniacally as he exacts revenge on this guy.
I remember that.
Have you seen it?
I have.
It is so disconcerting.
And it's so out of, it's like, I get that you're motivated by revenge, but you're angry and you're gritty about it. You're not like Joker about it. And it was just very weird.
It was unhinged.
Yeah.
Oh, we're guessing at the name. Was it Magda? It could have been Magda.
Might have been.
Of the lady from Octopussy.
Mm.
But like this is definitely. I probably watch License to Kill more than most other James Bond movies.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because of my overwhelming affection for Pam Bouvier. I do love Tim Dalton as Bond. I wish that he had at least done one more. I understand why he didn't. But this is definitely this is up there as one of my favorites.
I also really liked oh God, I'm blanking on his name now. Robert Davi's character, his
Sanchez.
Yes, his palatial estate that he has in Isthmus. I thought that was really cool. Like,
yeah. Oh,
I would love to have.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that when like through the commentary when Carrie Lowell got cast, she's saying, "Oh, I'm going to be in a Bond movie. We're going somewhere around the world." She said that she was from Colorado and had taken trips to Mexico throughout her life. And she was like, "Okay, so where are we filming? Where are we filming?" And they were like, "We're going to Mexico City." And she was like, "What a ripoff. I'm in a James Bond movie and I get to cross the border and that's it. What a waste." But she said it was beautiful and they had a good time filming it. Also, I did notice this time that there is somewhat of a precursor to the Mortal Kombat movie because you got Talia Soto, who was in that, and then one of the Hong Kong Secret Service with the ninjas. He plays the bad guy in Mortal Kombat. We should do a Mortal Kombat review someday.
Yeah, maybe.
Just to do like a who's who. See where do I know this person from?
I know him from other places too. I'd have to double check. Assuming it is who I think it is.
Yes. But I think that would be interesting just because I was like, wait a second, I think these guys are in Mortal Kombat.
I also really like Sanchez's iguana. That's really cool. That he carries around on his shoulder.
Well, and apparently when they were filming, it would actually get quite amorous and start like paying attention to Robert Davi. And some of the interactions with the iguana were improv on set. He just didn't know what to do, and John Glenn let it roll, and he was like, "That's good. We'll keep that in." And so and they allowed it because sometimes they say, don't improv, but when you're working with an animal, there is that difficulty. And apparently Robert Davi was just letting it roll off a duck's back. Daniel's Hot Topic says Christina Wayborn played Magda. I think was her. And Daniel's Hot Topic says, I wish they would have explained what happened to each Bond girl from each movie in the next movie. I'm very curious what happened to them. What did Bond eat them or so? Oh, what did Bond eat them or something? Yeah. Well, but that's part of the reason why
I don't ever get the sense that just because most movies end with him riding off into the sunset with the girl, that means they're going to have a committed relationship. It's like they're going to have a fling for a couple weeks that he has off before he has to go back to work. And they're like, oh, we'll keep in touch. And yeah, no.
Right. Well, and as we've talked about before with A View to a Kill, that was supposed to be the Triple X.
Right.
And that was going to be a reprisal. And then also, don't forget Sylvia Trench. We got Sylvia Trench for two consecutive movies, even though they're basically just cameos. But there are some relationships that sort of stick with it.
And also, speaking to the loose continuity thing anyway, about how they're kind of standalone adventures, it's like, in a way they don't want to acknowledge that because it's like we're telling a different story now.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And then if there is, and that's the thing, like as Eugene Bird said, it's like Daniel Craig is just simping for a girl for 5 movies. When you do start to add the emotional weight, it's like Vesper died, and then there's basically no romance in Quantum of Solace except for Strawberry Fields, which is unfortunate. And then, yeah, but you're always constantly being like, oh, Vesper, oh, this, everything. I am the author of your pain. And it just, it bogs it down, and you can't have fun with just a standalone adventure. And I wish there was more. I wish there was more of that. And then also, let's make sure that they throw the gun barrel in here. I want the gun barrel at the beginning of every film.
Yeah.
But I would say that Timothy Dalton's gun barrel is probably one of my favorites. I think Timothy Dalton and Brosnan had the best gun barrels.
Yeah, Brosnan, that's the one where they animated it for the first time, right?
Right. And I've heard people like poo-poo on that too.
I love that. That was so cool.
I thought it was kind of neat.
Yeah.
And the Batman is absolutely correct. Blofeld basically Bond's stepbrother was stupid beyond belief.
It's like you took the Austin Powers twist and put it in the movie. Like, what? It's like, oh, we have to. It's like, wait a minute. That franchise is what scared them into doing something different, because they're like, oh, we can't go back to what we were doing before, even though it worked just fine because Austin Powers made fun of it.
Yeah.
So you're trying to get away from that so much, so then you decide to take something directly from Austin Powers and put it in the movie?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
It's never been about like shitting on something. It's about like making fun of it with love.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I thought I was so jazzed, but this was also like when Spectre came out, there was this stupid thing, and I don't know who to blame. I'll just blame J.J. Abrams because I usually do. But it was this thing where people were cast as people that they could play. Like, I think Christoph Waltz would have been a great Blofeld had it been sort of put together properly.
Yeah.
But and I don't think, like, the other one that I'm thinking of is when they were like, are you going to play Blofeld? And he's like, no, I'm not. And then Benedict Cumberbatch is, are you playing Khan? No, I'm not. And it's like, why are you hiding this? Especially when it comes to those iconic characters. If you want to have a twist, that's cool, but don't do it at the expense of lying to the audience, because then you've lost the trust of the audience. I just hated that. The Batman says 100% we criticize out of love. Well, as long as there is an appreciation, because once you just start crapping on stuff all the time, it's like, are you even a fan, or do you just like crapping on stuff?
Yeah.
Not you, the Batman. Just in general. In this wacky world called the internet. Eugene Bird says, you guys know a shitload about movies, about the movies and lore. I didn't even know there were more books after the 60s. Well, and what is your experience with the books, Kat? Have you read anything outside of the Fleming?
Yeah, I have actually a set of them downstairs. There have been multiple authors over the years that have been pretty good. There's currently one that's actually set back in the 60s as like prequels to Dr. No, leading up to that, and some taking place after. I think the latest installment was Forever in a Day. The author's name escapes me for who the current writer is, but they're pretty good writers for that as well. That you should check out. Richard Benson was another one. Let's see what I gotta pull up that name, but they've had a few good authors over the years, because it's a good IP, and even the radio dramas have been pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Where what's his name? Toby Stevens, who played the villain in Die Another Day, was actually had the longest tenure as Bond in any format, because he was doing the radio dramas for well over a decade, like 12, 15 years or something. He was doing those. So that's something else that you could look into if you haven't heard them. But yeah, thanks. Yeah, check out some of those books. They're good. I mean, I read all the Fleming books when I first bought them all secondhand at a bookstore in town, like back in 2008, I want to say. And my experience with them is that they were a bit stale at times. The first half of the books the first third or so were paced very well. And then the stories kind of stopped dead at a certain point where he gets bogged down in tons of details that he didn't care to use in the first third that just slows the pacing down and kind of it becomes a bit of a chore after that to get through it. And it's like, oh, I could see where the filmmakers use this as a jumping off point. And that when it says, oh, it's based on this, it's like, yeah, based on it in name and maybe the rickety frame only, as they really do overhauls on each of these stories. But yeah, I check them out all the same.
The Batman says, and the way Blofeld gets taken out along with Spectre in No Time to Die was also beyond stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Barbara doing that thing again, where we're seeing the same thing in Star Wars right now with Kennedy, where they're overreacting to things. Oh, you made a bad movie. Oh, I guess we can't go forward with your Star Wars movie because you had a bad day at the office over here. Doesn't matter that we love your script and we know you're capable. Oh, you got to go. And it's like, oh, fans didn't like the Spectre movie. Oh, well, rather than hiring a new director, writer who could actually elevate the material and make it work, let's just, the marketing guys say that, oh, if you can't get it right in the movie of its namesake, then we can't do it right at all. So let's just throw it away. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. Well, and also but that's one of the downsides of the Craig era is because it is self-contained. You do have to sort of dispatch it. You have to, okay, we introduce it. Now it's gone. Like
they didn't have to. Well, yeah, I guess like even if they didn't kill off those characters, that it would still technically be dispatched because it's its own thing, its own continuity. But big problem there was that they introduced it way too late. It's like, like the fact that there was a valid question going into that movie whether it would be Daniel's last movie. Then why the hell are you introducing Spectre right now? It's that alone. But we heard that story. That was the story where the director, Sam Mendes, got fed up because Craig was being given too much power in the writer's room. And it got to the point where Mendes was saying the things we were saying, that no, this isn't going to work because obvious reasons. We're not taking the Austin Powers to it. We're not doing that. But he was constantly being overruled. And so he just eventually just threw up his hands and it was a job at some point. And that was it. I mean, it still made a lot of money, but
yeah, oh yeah. Well, and I watched. I actually heard a snippet of a Tarantino interview, and he was talking about the difference between Skyfall and Spectre, and he said he preferred Spectre over Skyfall because Skyfall, he was like, "What is this? It ends in a gunfight in a cabin. I want to see Spectre, where it's an actual James Bond movie in a crater in the desert." Like that's the James Bond with the giant explosions. I have fun with Spectre the more I watch it, but yes, there are some just awful things that happen in that movie.
And this is why it's fun for us to continue this series, just to talk about. Like we should consider doing that. Like we did all the heavy recap episodes. Now we can just go back through it for fun and just bullshit about it.
Yeah. Well, and that's why these anniversaries are cool, is so that we can do that. And just because eventually when we talk about it, and that's why I don't feel like we're neglecting talking about Bond, and we're supposed to be talking specifically about License to Kill, but because we've done that sort of fine-tooth comb recap and review, it feels more like, okay, now we'll get together, loose framework. Today we're talking about License to Kill, but we're really just here to talk about all of James Bond. And we hope that you guys are having fun with it too. Like, beautiful Sunday activity.
After all, this is the flagship show for Scott and I that launched our shared YouTube shows.
Yeah.
Of which you can find all the playlists on the Fantasmagorium, including Capes, Cows, and Crusaders for Batman fans in the chat.
Absolutely. And we're doing Faster and More Intense this Thursday. We'll be talking about the Star Wars: The Phantom Menace as we discuss the directorial efforts of George Lucas. But yeah, there's a bunch of playlists. We've done a bunch of reviews. It's been a blast. I can't believe it's been 3 years. Here's to 3 more. Hopefully we'll have a new Bond by then.
Yeah.
The Batman says John Gardner was decent.
That's right, John Gardner. He's another good one. Yeah.
Eugene Bird says, before The Phantom Menace came out, they asked George Lucas, who is the Phantom Menace? And he answered, Chancellor Palpatine. I heard on the internet, hiding nothing. Well, hey, perfect.
That's true, because he wasn't going to hide the Palpatine thing, but the one thing they hid is that he was very explicit to Ian McDiarmid that never, ever acknowledge until after the third movie comes out that you are Darth Sidious. Which is why he's not credited as Darth Sidious in the end credits of Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones. Or rather, Darth Sidious is not credited in that, because he's like, there will be some little kids out there seeing this for the first time who don't know that, and we're not going to spoil it for them.
See, that's nice. I like that. I like that idea. The Batman says, it completely undermined how threatening and dangerous Blofeld and Spectre had been made out to be. Well, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like that whole movie Scott and I talked about, that Blofeld's evil plan is what I would call an ease of workflow plan. Like, instead of having agents in the field reporting on what's going on and what we're doing, now we can just click a button on the keyboard and have instant access. I'm like, really? That's it? It's like, that's your evil plan?
The Batman says they had to get the rights in court from the owner, who was the guy who made the Never Say Never Again movie. Yeah.
Yes,
Kevin McClory.
Yeah, they had tried and failed many times to sue him. Actually, they did succeed finally in the 90s in stopping him from doing another remake. It was going to be called Warhead 2000, another remake of Thunderball, and they stopped him from doing this. And then he died either the week before or the week after Casino Royale was released. And like 5 or 6 years later, his kids or whoever was running the estate just called them up and decided, hey, you want it? And then they negotiated, and they paid however much they paid for it to make sure that they never had to do that again.
Well, and that's the thing, like with Quantum. Quantum was supposed to be like the new improved Spectre, and then
that's so. They shouldn't even have named it yet. The fact that they knew when they were making that movie that Kevin McClory had already passed away, it's like, well, obviously be polite and respectful. Don't go knocking on the door when the body's still not even cold yet. But don't give the organization a name. Just hint that there is one and leave it be, and then here it goes. But no, they had to call it Quantum, and then they never explain. They never reconcile that in the movie Spectre. In my head canon, I'm guessing Quantum is the financial branch of Spectre, because the first movie is about Lashif helping out Terra so he could take a percentage off the top. And Quantum of Solace is about getting a hold of the water rights so they get a ton more money, which ultimately isn't coming from Bolivia, but it's coming from the nations which help Bolivia that are paying for these things. And Spectre and Quantum's taking a ton of money off the top. So, okay, your evil plan is making money to fund other evil plans that we never get to see come to fruition, because we never get to see it. But yeah, and I noticed even in the climax of Spectre, where they're doing the ridiculous, having the villains' faces on the printouts on the walls, they deliberately didn't put Dominic Green because they don't want you to think about that movie.
Yeah.
They hadn't been, like, it took a while for them to finally stick up for Quantum of Solace and defend the choices they made there, but they didn't do that for quite a while.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of evident in that and Everything or Nothing documentary, is that they'll talk about the introduction of Daniel Craig and Casino Royale and the success and Martin Campbell and Eva Green, and then we made Quantum of Solace. Now there's Skyfall, and oh my God, we got Albert Finney and Sam Mendes, and it's just like it's not even a speed bump or a blip. It's just like, and Quantum of Solace. And then they move on completely and don't discuss it. But I still think it's like,
I have to see it.
Great.
I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen it yet? Oh, it's a great time.
No.
The Batman says they shifted the villain organization from Quantum to Spectre. They had been building up Quantum to be the new villain group because they didn't have the rights to Spectre. Yeah, and I get that, and I'm fine with that, and I'm kind of with you in terms of the headcanon of it being just sort of a division of Spectre. But we already had, like, if you look at From Russia with Love, they have a Blofeld there. They don't name him Blofeld, do they? Do they call him Blofeld, or do they just call him number one?
He's just number one.
Right. So we can have someone who is going to be Blofeld, or at least a silhouette of a guy who's going to be Blofeld at some point. We don't name the organization, and that's it. And then you say, okay, well, that's out there somewhere. And then when you do develop the rights, or you just keep it the shadowy organization in the background, which doesn't seem like a bad idea either. They've done it they've done it before, and I just don't understand why they didn't understand that they could just have the back of someone's head and drop them in a smokestack.
Well, I didn't like the idea that they were going with a shared universe organization anyway. So look, we're in the modern era. Let's just do modern stories, and not everything has to be interconnected.
You didn't want to have like sort of the reintroduction of Spectre or Blofeld?
Well, I feel like if you're going to do that, you have to do it in the first movie. And they didn't do that because they were doing Casino Royale. And then Quantum of Solace, you didn't even get. I mean, yeah, they have the shared meeting, and it's like, okay. But that felt more like a corporate cabal of like corrupt brokers or something like that, who were maybe like unifying for tax shelter reasons or something like that. It didn't feel like, because like you mentioned, like the Tarantino example, and you say Spectre, you have expectations of what that means. It doesn't. Whereas Quantum seemed like a hyper realistic version of what a Spectre organization would be. So it's like, if you're going to tread on the name Spectre at some point, then you kind of, that's by definition, that's a fantasy concept. Like super villains and evil layers. It's like, well, then it's like, you can't do the gritty, realistic thing of, oh, we're going to do an ease of workflow plan here by hacking into computers, but then call it Spectre, but then have your base in the meteorite crater and all that kind of stuff. You can't have that cake and eat it too. It doesn't work. It's like, you either go all in on the fantasy or try and do a more grittier movie like Casino Royale again. Trying to do a mixed bag. It just kind of, like, that whole movie Spectre is really about homaging previous Spectre movies. Like, they did the Peace Gloria thing with it was also the clinic that Swan was working at, just like Blofeld and Majesties, and they had the Orient Express stand-in for the train through Morocco, the train fight with Batista instead of Red Grant. The big, instead of the big meeting in Thunderball, the boardroom meeting, it's in in Rome, in this beautiful basilica or whatever. It's like, okay, each thing, and instead of the volcano base, it's the meteorite base. And so it's like each thing is like, let's homage this, but it's not letting it be its own movie. It's like a Spectre's greatest hits type movie. And yes, it's beautiful to look at. The cinematography is luscious.
Yeah.
And the settings are gorgeous. I call it and Skyfall postcard movies because realistically, if you go to the places featured in that movie, like Rome, there's going to be people everywhere at night. Like, Rome was like, there's barely any cars out, and it's gorgeous to look at with the lighting and everything. And that so-called, the car chase between Batista and Bond, but it looks really cool just to see, but it's not realistic. And one of the things I like about the Dalton, Moore, Connery, and Brosnan movies is that when they go to places in the real world, it's real. It's not like it's not like a touristy thing. And whereas it felt like the Craig movies at times are trying to feel more artistic, and it's like, no, it's like you do so in short, you do the fantasy thing and go all in on Spectre, or you don't. Kind of like I felt about this movie Overlord that Abrams produced, where it's like a D-Day movie, and you find out there's like some Wolfenstein stuff going on, but it doesn't go all the way. It's like, if you're gonna go like allude to Wolfenstein type stuff, you got to really hit the gas on that and go all in, and they don't. Sort of like that awful Doom movie that The Rock was in, who fortunately he owned up and said, yeah, that was a bad movie, an example of what we shouldn't do when adapting a beloved IP. It's like, no, don't hide around the corners and do little zombies in the dark. No, if you're going to do Doom, bring me cyber demons and Gaga demons and all those and all that type, and Hell Knights and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
but nothing.
Well, that was Doom was also a victim of the Doom video game franchise itself, because I think Doom 3 came out and they were really emulating Doom 3 as opposed to Doom 1 and 2.
But Doom 3 is also an excellent game with a lot of great monsters in it.
Well, great, yeah, but it's also more that's more survival horror as opposed to running gun first person shooter. But it cross promotion. But you're right, that I think we can both agree that it was terrible. The Batman says, Batman and 007 are my favorite characters in fiction. Outstanding. I am I like Batman. I like 007. You should check out those playlists.
Oh yeah, look, check this out. The Batman. I've got all of these you're seeing here, all Batman. The only thing that isn't Batman is that little book on top of the 3 white. That right there is the only thing not Batman on that whole shelf. All of this is Batman. All the stuff back here, all Batman. Just tons of Batman. A
Wicked
lot of
cool.
omnibuses and collected editions. I love it. And then I just got for my birthday recently, last week, the Hush Saga Omnibus.
That's outstanding. Hardcover?
Oh, of course. This sucker's massive. Use it as a doorstop. I won't, but you could.
You could. I wouldn't. I love Krusty. Daniel's Hot Topic says, I had this theory. I wanted to know what happened to the Bond girls, so I thought, what if each Bond girl was brought into MI6 and trained to be agents, and they went on missions with Bonds? However, each Bond girl was caught and tortured and killed, and Bond could not do anything to save them, which gives that line that Alec Trevelyan said in more meaning when he said all the women Bond failed to protect. No. That's an interesting sort of side theory, and I have no problem with it, although I like to think that sometimes James Bond does actually save the people. He's not just a powerhouse that leaves a wake of bodies behind him, even if that is sometimes true.
Yeah.
But it would add a little bit of poignancy to that line, Daniel. No argument.
All the dead women he failed to protect, yeah.
The Batman says McClory had sued Ian Fleming and won, saying he helped Fleming conceive of Thunderball. Yeah, that was through the writing of the novel.
And frankly, I don't understand the writing of the script for the TV show or for the TV movie. Fleming then tried to turn it into a novel, but I don't understand why Bond film fans like to vilify McClory, because he is right. He is the one who came to him with this idea, and they collaborated on it. They made it. It didn't come to fruition, and so Fleming decided, well, I'll just write it as a novel so I can get around the right situation. And that was clearly his motivation, because he had already signed the contract with Broccoli and Saltzman by then. And, I'm not going to give them the credit, and we're going to do this. And it's like, well, you can't really be mad at McClory for protecting his stake in something he was heavily involved in. But for some reason, Bond fans always kind of bitch about him and paint him as a villain. It's like, no, it's Fleming's fault. And then it's also Broccoli and Saltzman's fault for thinking that, after him lending us Blofeld's Inspector for the next 10 years, he'll just be such a hotshot producer by then in Hollywood after having produced a Bond movie that he won't care, and he'll just let us buy it out. Well, no, because Kevin's career never did take off. And that's precisely why he would not let them buy those rights from him, and then instead went off and eventually did Never Say Never Again. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that is you're correct. Like, in terms of it's sort of short-sighted to vilify McClory, but that's also the nature. Like,
and he also brought what's his name? The guy who helped him write the Thunderball TV script helped turn Bond into more of a charming character. That was in the Thunderball TV script that was not produced, which Richard Maybaum subsequently read before he wrote Dr. No's script. And so he borrowed that charm element that was brought to the character by McClory and put it in the Dr. No script, and the results speak for themselves. So he is integral to helping make the character the iconic character that we know and love today.
Yeah, but that is just my supposition is that that's the nature of fandom. When you had McClory up until they made Never Say Never Again, people couldn't have cared less about McClory.
Right.
And it was, whose team are you on? Are you team Connery or are you team Moore? And then it's like, well, how are they going to be these two things? And then you get into the whole story and McClory and who sued Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming, he created James Bond. We love that guy. And so, like, everything just becomes sports. It just becomes tribal. We don't like him because he messed up the thing that we like, even though the thing that you like was actually partially created by the guy that you don't. So it just gets confusing, and it gets people to have their opinions and talking. So, but I was duped by it myself. I hated Kevin McClory for the longest time too, until I actually looked into it, and it was fun. There we go. Batman says the plot of Quantum of Solace sounds like a Lex Luthor plot from the Reeves Superman movies. Even worse, yes. Although there are asteroids involved in both. The
plot is actually a true story, though. It did happen. That's what the Water Wars were about in Bolivia from 1997 to 2005.
Oh, that's true too.
The privatization of their water and being, priced out of it.
Daniel's Hot Topic says, my fate Bond girl is Dr. Holly Goodhead from Moonraker. She could kick ass and wasn't a damsel in distress like Ursula Andress or the second Bond girl, the Russian woman. What's her face?
Tatiana Romanova.
That's her. That's her. Herc 130 is here. It's good to see you, buddy. Wasabi. Daniel's Hot Topics agrees. This rocks. Doom sucks. Eugene Bird says Ursula Andress. The GoldenEye Russian girl. I agree with you, Daniel's Hot Topics, but Halle Berry is in there too in my top 3. The Batman says, Cat, that is fantastic. I have a huge Batman memorabilia collection in my gaming room. There's a glass case in there with tons of figurines and dolls, etc. Sweet.
That's awesome. And if you could also see up there, the Batman, all the way at the edge there, you see my Burton Schumacher Batman 4K Steelbook set. And then I also have the Nolan 4K Batman trilogy in a regular box set down there somewhere. And I have 2 different 4K Steelbooks of different artwork designs for The Batman by Matt Reeves on the top shelf there. So that's cool.
Yeah, very. Daniel says, Kat, did you hear when someone asked Michael Keaton if his Batman would return? Keaton responded, never say never. And there was a rumor DC may bring back Keaton in Batman, the Brave and the Bold. Are we bringing back Keaton again, Daniel's Hot Topics?
I don't think so, simply because even though I think Keaton was good in The Flash, I don't think that movie did the numbers. Or, I mean, it definitely didn't do the numbers they were looking for in terms of popularity. I don't think they'll bring it back or bring him back. I think with James Gunn, he's abandoning the whole multiverse thing, and it's just we're like that's cast off now. It's like the DCEU is finished. It's a self-contained thing, and the DC stuff from beforehand is finished, and they're just gonna, hard reboot, so to speak. So I don't think we'll see him again. I'd love to see Michael Keaton as Batman again, but I don't think we will.
I'm happy with. Well, I never even saw The Flash, so. The Batman says, I agree with you, Kat. I think where he lost the script, though, was when he wanted to film additional Bond movies, but beyond Never Say Never Again. Yeah,
it's true. That was in, I think, the later 80s, in the 90s, and then when they fought him successfully on that, that's when he decided he was going to do Warhead 2000.
It's just such a bad title.
I know.
The Batman says the fans didn't want competing Bond franchises, especially when he would be poaching former Eon Bond actors. Fans were afraid this would cause competition within the fandom and confuse casual fans. Precisely. I agree with that 100%. But
Connery only signed on to that because of the paycheck.
And also,
because what was it? Was it Johnny Carson who asked him in that famous question, "Who's the greatest Bond villain?" And he says, "Cubby Broccoli."
Yes. Yeah. Daniel's Hot Topic says Halle Berry and Ian McKellen refused to be in Deadpool 3. Really? Huh. I didn't even hear that. And the Batman says, Kat, I'm nerding out over your amazing Batman goodies.
Oh, thanks. Yes, all of that. I got the Road to No Man's Land, No Man's Land 1, No Man's Land 2, Grant Morrison sets. The 3 white ones lying sideways are the ones by Neil Adams that he did with Denny O'Neil in the 70s. And I've got the collections of they did this one called the Batman Arkham series, where they took like the best stories of certain villains, like Scarecrow, Black Mask, Man-Bat, Clayface, Roz, Victor, Strange, Freeze, Ivy, Two-Face, Riddler, Penguin, all that kind of stuff. I've got all the famous graphic novels like Long Halloween, Dark Victory, the Nightfall trilogy, Haunted Night, the entire Scott Snyder to Tom King run. I've not yet gotten the James Tynion run because I was waiting for them to all be available in paperback, which they finally are. But yeah, I got this. It's a massive Batman collection. And I also have downstairs, which I'm not going to get for the show right now, is the massive Lego Batman tumbler. 2000.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
And the Lego Batman Batmobile from The Batman, the Robert Pattinson one. Unfortunately, I did miss out on the Lego 89 Batmobile, and I'm still kicking myself for that because, of course, the Lego 89 Batwing, because those were gorgeous.
And the Batman says Connery wanted to upstage more, was also part of why he did Never Say Never Again. There was a bit of friendly rivalry in play as well. Yes, true. And I do, and whenever you come across those clips, and I just saw one with Michael Caine, Sean Connery, and Roger Moore at one Academy Awards, and they just all come out to present. And it's always nice to see the playful banter. And I wish there was rumors before Connery passed away that there was going to be a moment for the 50th anniversary of Bond, and they would have all of the James Bonds on stage. And I was disappointed. I think it's the only reason I watched the Oscars that year. Is I was hoping for that to happen. It never happened. I was upset and I cried. Daniel's Hot Topic says, I remember having competitive Batman arguments with friends in public school. I was arguing that Michael Keaton is the best Batman because he has body armor and cannot die from being shot. I do enjoy Michael Keaton's Batman. And Daniel says Adam West did not have body armor, so he could be one-shot. He could be one-shotted, but others argued that Adam West did not need body armor because he could do without it. Well, and that's what I like of it, like for the classic Batman stories, that it's actual fabric and not body armor. But I understand why that was sort of upgraded as time went on. Anywho, I am thinking it is that time. If that's okay with you, Kat.
It is. The only thing I would say, Jan put out a 4K box set of the first 20 movies. Well, 25. They should all be together.
Yeah.
I caved and got the 4K digital because I was holding out in 2022 for the 60th anniversary that they might announce a 4K box set, and I couldn't believe that they didn't do it because the 4Ks are the first 20 films that have existed since 2015. And I took advantage of a Bond Day deal on that day into that 2022 and got that 4K digital set. And my God, they blew my Bond 50 sets out of the water. The color timing, the clarity, it was unbelievable. And I want them on disc. I do.
Yeah, of course, of course.
They sell like hotcakes.
Well, but expensive hotcakes.
Yeah.
$25 or 25 film 4K box set. I got
the 4K box set of the Craig era because they put that out, so I could deal with the first 20 by themselves.
The first 20.
I would actually take the discs and just put them in there and swap out the Blu-rays and put the 4Ks.
That makes sense.
That's a really good mindset.
Final question from the Batman. One question to Phantasmagorium hosts. Who would your fave choice for the next 007 if you can make the decision right now?
Who would you pick, Scott?
Tom Hiddleston.
You know, I remember a lot of people were saying that because of The Night Manager.
Yeah, I really like The Night Manager.
And I just didn't jive with that series, the casting at all. I just had a hard time seeing it. I honestly don't know because I haven't really been keeping track of who like other hot young British talent is. I was on the Idris Elba train for a long time, and I'm still disappointed that didn't happen. It could have once upon a time if they would have just made the movies a bit faster. But I'm kind of stumped right now.
We will revisit the Batman. Please stay tuned to the Phantasmagorium show.
Oh yeah, but if you're saying decision right now, Dreamcasting would be Idris Elba. I think he's perfect for that.
Oh, okay, sure.
He's a little older now, but I think he could do a few of them if you just shot him back to back real quick or something. So yeah, I would do Idris Elba. I think he's fantastic.
Oh, and yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that I could also go for Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Yeah, that's good.
I think he'd be pretty like if that's the route that you wanted to go in terms of having a British African actor.
It has nothing to do with the ethnic background. It's just I just think Idris Elba is great and just like the guy
Sure.
radiates Bond's charm and charisma and handsome and all that kind of stuff. I think he'd be great for that role.
Yes. But in terms of, I have to see, maybe they're the same age. I don't know how
Yeah, he's
old.
probably I agree, though. He's kind of aged out of it now. I mean, 20 years ago would have been a good time as well.
And Daniel's Hot Topic says Hugh Jackman as the next James Bond. And no apology necessary with the Batman. Sorry, my typing has been off. Not my normal keyboard or desk setup.
Oh, you're good.
Well, you're better than good. You're ice cold. You're wicked cool. But that being said, I wanted to thank you guys in the chat for being here. Thanks to the Batman, Daniel's Hot Topics, Ernesto, Eugene Bird, of course. Thank you so much for your generosity again, sir. Affinity for being here. Thank you. And Franco, or sorry, Herc130, thank you for being here. And we will be back, much like James Bond. We're coming back on Thursday night. And we're going to be talking about Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Oh, and Jill was here. Thank you, Jill.
And be on the lookout for a potential 45th anniversary Moonraker show. Yeah, it's not the official specific date anniversary like this movie either. It was sometime in the summer, but hell, it's the year, so we'll do it sometime. And
yeah.
then special guest.
And then obviously there will be a special one come December for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which will be fun to revisit as well. And again, thank you for being here, Hakeem. I don't want to lose anybody here. But yeah, do you remember what the catchphrase was?
And another big one in December.
Yes.
The 50th for Man with the Golden Gun.
Oh.
50th anniversary this December.
Okay, I'm in.
That's good. Yep, we're there for that.
So we will continue with the James Bond content. We'll continue doing the reviews. Thank you for joining me.
And it's the 60th anniversary of Goldfinger next month.
Oh, jeez.
1964. I forgot.
I'm gonna have to start scheduling out some anniversary shows.
It's the year of Bond anniversaries.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. But thank you again, Kat. This is it's fantastic. I'm glad we've been able to do this for so long. I'm glad that you've put up with me. I do thank you, and I appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you have and the insight that you have for film.
Bless your heart.
Okay, bye everybody.